All right, this is David Avocado Wolfe, and I'm here with my friend David Wilcock. And David, tell us a little bit about how you just created an internet storm with that video that went out there. Tell us a little bit about the thinking that went behind it, and if those folks who are listening right now or watching don't know about it, if they can find it, what is it called?
It's called 2012 Enigma. It was the #1 most viewed video on Google December 1st last year. The premise is this. There's a lot of things happening in the world right now. You have ETs visiting us, more and more cosmic experiences people are having in their daily lives. You're also seeing earth changes. You're seeing too much water, not enough water. And all sorts of things like this are happening, not just on Earth, but throughout the solar system.
More storms on planets, and things are heating up.
Yeah, we call it interplanetary climate change. And so that's the real smoking gun that shows us that 2012 is not simply another year. It's actually a significant event, which involves the transformation of the human spirit to a higher evolution. Now, I have all the evidence that shows DNA actually can be transmuted from one species to another, and that energetic process has driven fossil evolution on Earth in these million-year cycles of time, 62 million-year cycles and 26 million-year cycles.
So that's related to pulse waves that come from the center of the galaxy?
Correct.
Who was that guy who had that book on that subject?
Paul LaViolette.
What an amazing book he put out there. And maybe you could tell a little bit about that side of things, because all we get is like creationism, evolution, and we don't really understand what DNA is, because we're saying
Sure.
that 97% of it's junk.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the energy that's around us right now while we're talking, while you're watching this video, is actually DNA forming. Life is something that forms everywhere it can. One of the guys who discovered the DNA molecule proved that 99.9% of all the dust in the galaxy gives off the same light signature as bacteria in space.
Wow.
So everything is alive. And the DNA wave is built by the galaxy, which has got its own consciousness, its own intelligence. And so, although this sounds more esoteric than some people are ready to accept, the universe, when it was first created, the galaxies were the primordial beings.
Okay.
And they set up a system of rules of how life would evolve on every planet in their galaxy. Our galaxy created a human template. That's why all the visitors are human-looking in some form or another.
Okay.
And so we are actually going to be welcoming, and that's one of the things I was told in the dream the other night, was that your group is going to help welcome a lot of these visitors in as this shift comes into being. Now, of course, I have a lot of scientific information that backs up all this stuff, too. You can look, for example, at DNA in a laboratory and see that the DNA takes all the light around itself and spirals it. And the light actually travels in a corkscrew. Then you take the DNA out of the tube, and the corkscrew continues happening with all the light.
It's still there.
You can blast it with liquid nitrogen, it goes away for 6 or 7 minutes, and then it comes back. And it'll stay there for 30 days.
Is it the water that's carrying it? What is it? Is it imprinted into the fabric of reality?
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting you mentioned water. I think you're tuning into it, because the fabric of reality itself is fluid-like.
Okay.
There is this substrate, or this super reality that all matter comes from. We can't normally interface with it, but it is all based on vibration, and that's why things like toning, things like color, things like geometry actually entrain the field and create resonance with the field.
And drumming, you said.
Yes, drumming.
And drumming has a lot to do with shamanism, obviously, but I really enjoyed your thoughts on that the other day when we were talking about that. Can you describe that again? Like, drumming entrains that flow.
Right. The field is existing through everything. So the field exists in oxygen. The field exists in the air. So even the rhythm of breathing, the rhythm of meditative breathing, creates, if you create a pulse, then what you're doing is you're creating a resonance in the field, which allows energy to bleed in from the hyper-reality, which you will then experience in your conscious mind. Everybody thinks they're looking for something outside themselves. They think, oh, I'm not psychic. Well, no. The point is, everybody's mind is the universal mind. If you get clear enough, what comes into your mind is going to be thoughts from the field directly. So when you're drumming, you get that repetitive pulse, which allows information to come in from the field, which you'll then experience in real time. Some people have visions, some people have downloads, some people have trance states. Depends on the person, but you're going to have a real experience with this higher consciousness.
In our community, we call that the 0 point energy, right? That's the ether, the 0 point energy, the flow, and we have all different kinds of words to describe like the super reality, essentially, the super flowing reality that's around us. It encourages, and imbibes all energy bodies. It's basically the Force from Star Wars days. Tell us a little bit about Star Wars. Where's that all come from?
Well,
what are your thoughts on that? Because David, by the way, David's 37, I'm 39. We grew up in the Star Wars age, probably like you watching right now. Some thoughts on Star Wars?
Of course, we know that Joseph Campbell wrote the book The Hero's Journey, and that George Lucas was a big scholar of Campbell, and so he put all the Campbell Hero's Journey stuff into Star Wars. Originally, the hero was supposed to be Luke Skywalker, and then when the movie did so well, he rewrote the script and made it into Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And Darth Vader was now this guy involved in a story that took a lot longer to resolve, and that's how you got the last two movies, and then he wrote the prequels. The hero's journey is very fascinating because that is the story that I was telling you about before of the galaxy. So the reason why Star Wars is such an effective movie series is that it is telling us the story of every human spirit. We all are Darth Vader. We all go through this fall from grace and a descent into negativity. And I know your community really focuses on diet, and that's a great thing. If you can discipline yourself to kind of rise above the thought forms of fear and depravity and scarcity consciousness that's so prevalent in this world, and be able to embrace the vitality of living foods. I mean, the Star Wars paradigm is, of course, the Force, the Jedi. And your people are part of that Jedi. You're part of that new energy. And if you want to have the abilities that Luke Skywalker was developing, you have to eat for an energy body. You can't just feed the physical body.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because eating for the energy body, one of the things that I really enjoyed the other day was this whole thing about microclusters.
Yeah.
And you're telling us about microclusters. I was doing my whole rap on Ormus and that kind of stuff, and David was watching. And then afterwards he said, well, what about microclusters? Let's talk a little bit about that, and then what that does to our light body and feeding our light body.
Absolutely. As you probably know, I know you know because we talked about this, the ancients had this thing they called mifkazit, which means what is it? It was the philosopher's stone in alchemy. It's this whole idea of a compound that you would eat. The Egyptians would go on a 40-day fast where they have nothing but white powder gold.
Yeah. And
then after 40 days, you basically have ascended ability. So what's the real science behind this? Well, it's been called ORMES, O-R-M-E-S, Orbitally Rearranged Monatomic Elements, by David Hudson. And he did some very strange stuff. He took microcluster iridium, which is monatomic, and he heats it to 850 degrees Celsius, at which point it goes invisible and it loses all its mass. But then when you cool down the area of space where it was, it actually comes back.
Yep. So it's going into another dimension of some sort.
Right. The temperature is a vibration, and the vibration takes that sacred geometry that's in the gold and makes it pop into a higher frequency. Now, that's the sacred geometry part. Let me get into that, because that's the basis of your question.
Yep.
I found a book from Springer Verlag. It's a college textbook called Microcluster Physics. It's by Sugano and Koizumi, two Japanese scientists.
Okay.
What they've done is they've found a new state of matter. Normally what we do is we look at fine particles, and then it immediately goes up to bulk, and it's not believed that there's any sort of
in between.
Right, organization down there at the level of only like a few hundred atoms or something. But what they actually found was that if they shoot atoms through a little nozzle, one atom at a time, it's called an adiabatic expansion. The atoms don't just spit out. They end up wanting to gather together, and they form these beautiful platonic solid geometries. Icosahedron, dodecahedron, cuboctahedron, square, the cube rather.
These are platonic shapes. For those of us who are watching right now going, what in the world is that? It's a shape, right? So, for example,
a soccer ball.
Like a soccer ball has, there's different 5 pentagons on it, or what is a soccer ball? Is it 5 or 6?
12 pentagons, 5-sided object per pentagon. So the point is that these geometries are really like the core of how the field expresses itself into matter. They are matter-forming energies, and that's why atoms and molecules, when they are allowed to, there's these natural forces that push them together into that shape.
Into those shapes, right.
But what happens is when we drink water that hasn't been properly clustered, we're not getting that geometry. If you notice with all the Masaru Emoto work on water, you have people meditate on water, and then what happens?
Changes geometry.
He looks at it under a microscope, and as it unfreezes and then refreezes, it forms these beautiful crystals. Well, that's because the water has now taken on all those platonic solid shapes because it interfaces with consciousness. Consciousness creates that field that makes that geometry, right?